chapter 20, The Jawbone That Spoke Martian. In 1979, there was this dental technician. I believe he was working at the Veterans Hospital, right? And he
right outside of Dayton, yes.
Exactly. I'll let you tell the story. That was my question. It's about that.
Well, he formerly had worked as far as at Wright Pat, also in the Air Medical Facility as a dental technician. So upon retiring, he then, they set up their own dental facility, the dental lab, but he started also working at the VA hospital, as you mentioned, John. And he was approached by his boss one particular day with a bone, with a mandible, that he wanted a impression made, a duplicate, and he'd be back the next day to pick it up. Well, the first thing you typically would do when you're handed an actual bone is you go to the sink and you rinse off whatever blood or saliva, whatever residue is still on it. There was none. It was dried bone. But more amazing was the fact that, my God, this is not a human mandible. This isn't a human jawbone. And there are no teeth. There's nothing that would suggest that it had teeth. So he created the relief. The next day, his boss picked it up. And then he said to him, "You didn't do anything. I don't want you to repeat anything about this. It never happened." And he took the impression that he had cast the duplicate from, crumbled it up and tossed it in the waste paper basket. And he left. Well, Musgrove followed him from a distance, watched him walk down in the parking lot, and there were two Air Force officers waiting. One Musgrove recognized from Wright Patterson, a colonel that he had served under years before. They took the original bone, mandible, and the relief, placed them in the briefcase, they shook hands, and they left. Well, that's when Musgrove truly realized what was at stake. And then he went back to the lab, took the crumbled impression out of the waste paper basket, reconstructed it, and then cast another mold. And he placed that in a bank security box for the next 30 years. And then there was a reporter, a newsman by the name of Carl Day, Emmy Award-winning NBC reporter in Dayton, who he turned it over to. And they had contacted us. And that's when we were approached. Carl Day had approached us about even writing a book on Wright Pat. And unfortunately, Carl would die 6 months later after we had made the proposal for doing such a book. But nonetheless, we still acquired a copy, a relief of that mandible. It's been examined by 6 separate paleontologists, and each one, after comparing it to over 2,000 mandibles, whether human, primate, or any animal, as the one at the New York University Paleontology Department said, this is not from this earth.
Go ahead, Preston.
Well, this is gripping stuff, you guys. And I'm wondering, with the government cover-up still in place, have either of you experienced any kind of suspicious activity in that regard in terms of, government interference or whoever's covering this up?
Yes, we had some earlier this evening. Our phone kept cutting out.
Yeah, that's true. Could have been because of the rumor we were talking about.
No, that had never happened to me before. But so besides that, no. As far as I'm concerned, other than some clicks on the phone, nothing that we could identify as harassment. I know Don and I have a little joke when we're talking on the phone and we hear some little clicks. We have a little routine we go into that, hey, in case somebody's listening, we say, hey, we can be bought. We have we can be bought and go away. Our price will go up tomorrow. So, but they haven't taken us up on it.
Early into the investigation, for the first number of years, there were all types of demonstrations that we were being watched, that we were having a lot of phone problems, a lot of clicking, a lot of cutting off. And it's one of the reasons that we weren't using names in conversation. We would typically refer to Roswell number 1, 2, 3. We would kept changing the numbers every week. We were involved in a high-speed chase between Albuquerque and Corona at 2 o'clock in the morning one time. Executive producer Paul Davids of the Roswell movie reminded me that we were driving through Los Angeles one time, and a dark car pulled up alongside of us and rolled down the window and snapped a picture of us at an intersection, and then took off. I had forgotten about that. Tom would remember that we were leaving from the contract archaeology department from Albuquerque one afternoon, and we were the only car in the parking lot. And all at once, a car comes flying up from the street up into the parking lot, and a woman driver keeps yelling for me to come over to the car. And Tom was in the trunk. We were putting some things back in the trunk, and I just kept, we're not from around here. What do you want? And she kept saying, I want you to come over here. And I kept saying, you need directions? We're not from here. And then she finally, I want to look at your suit. And that was kind of strange that she, raced into the parking lot to comment on my sport coat. And I finally, I walked away, and she just took off, and, we didn't know better. There was somebody ducked down in the back seat. It was very strange. So there are all types of such stories, but it doesn't faze us. It really doesn't, because if it did, we'd be up at night.
Well, the closer you're getting to the truth, the more you're on the radar of them, and it seems to be that you are getting close. Back to this mandible, one thing I love about the story is that once the impression was crushed and thrown away, and the person asked for the prescription, and he was told, nope, it never happened, you never did this, you weren't here. And then he witnessed this person hand it over to 2 uniformed officers. But then they went back and took the impression out and meticulously put it back together and created their own cast, which you have in your book. And I think that is mind-blowing when it's compared to a human jawbone, because you could...
In fact, we have a display at the museum in Roswell of that mandible, that impression in comparison to a human mandible. So it's a full display. And so we always invite people, certainly, if you're interested in the subject at all. The museum in Roswell, not only the library, but also there's a research area, just a tremendous wealth of UFO documentation, the book collection, thousands of UFO books, and then the displays themselves, including this copy of this mandible, which, again, you look at it, and then we have it superimposed over, the typical, alien head, as described within UFO encounters, and it matches. It's the typical pointed, the V shape as far as chin.
So that goes to show that physical evidence is still out there to some degree, and just like with that mandible, that recreation that came from physical evidence, and that's what I think is one of the most extraordinary things. We got under a minute left, and I wanted to give you, Mr. Schmidt, you participated in the Citizen Hearing. We've spoken to several of the witnesses since then, and I want to give you all a quick final statement of what the listeners and the viewers of Third Phase of the Moon can do to help get the secret blown open. Quickly, if you guys got 10 seconds each, if you got a final statement.
To get the secret blown open, buy our books, call your congressman, call Don Schmidt, call Don Schmidt's friend. I don't know. It's Don and I feel that this disclosure move is just never going to happen. It's never going to happen, and we just have to keep doing what we're doing. And we've never gotten any help from the government, the Air Force, or anybody like that. All we can do is to keep getting the information out and let the weight of the evidence prevail.
Well, the evidence is getting there.
You've been listening to Revolution Radio.
As you mentioned, John. And he was approached by his boss one particular day with a bone, with a mandible, that he wanted a impression made, a duplicate, and he'd be back the next day to pick it up. Well, the first thing you typically would do when you're handed an actual bone is you go to the sink and you rinse off whatever.
That was my question. It's about that.
Well, he formerly had worked as far as at Wright Pat, also in the air medical facility as a dental technician. So upon retiring, he then, they set up their own dental facility, the dental lab, but he started also working at the VA hospital.
Chapter 20, The Jawbone That Spoke Martian. In 1979, there was this dental technician. I believe he was working at the Veterans Hospital, right? And he
right outside of Dayton, yes.
Exactly. I'll let you tell the story.
Blood or saliva, whatever residue is still on it. There was none. It was dried bone. But more amazing was the fact that, my God, this is not a human mandible. This isn't a human jawbone. And there are no teeth. There's nothing that would suggest that it had teeth. So he created the relief. The next day, his boss picked it up. And then he said to him, "You didn't do anything. I don't want you to repeat anything about this. It never happened." And he took the impression that he had cast the duplicate from, crumbled it up and tossed it in the waste